Welcome once again to the People of the Free Gift podcast, where we ground believers in their identity in Christ and equip them to reach out to those caught in religion. We're glad you joined us. Well, welcome back to the podcast. We are continuing through the Gospels and take our look chronologically through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as to the teachings and the ministry of Jesus. And we are in Luke 16 today, and we're going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about stewardship, and mostly in the form of a parable that Jesus told. It's actually one of the most confusing parables that Jesus told, and on the surface it's confusing, but as we get into it, we're going to find it's actually not that hard to understand what Jesus was driving at and what he calls us to. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Luke 16 verse 1, and he said also unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. And he called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you may be no longer steward. So this is the moment that all of us dread, right? Our boss comes over into our office, or maybe we're in a cubicle, so we're out in the open, and where other people can hear, and he says, hey, I've been hearing some things about you. And let's imagine you're the accountant, or you do something with the numbers, and he says, hey, people out there, they're saying, you're not a good guy. You're not an honest guy. You have been playing around with the numbers, and you've been wasting my money, and I'm going to have you give an account. But by the way, before you even give the account, you're fired. Okay? That's the moment that all of us dread. And so that's the scenario. Now, I can't help but notice that in Luke 15, it was the story of the prodigal son. And this comes right on the heels of this. And so you have this comparable scenario. This time, it's a steward. It is a servant, right, of this guy. And he deals with his finances, and he wastes his master's money the same way that the prodigal son, had wasted his father's money and his inheritance. And so I just couldn't help but notice that. But now we think about this as we dread it in terms of the workplace scenario. But ultimately, we're going to find out this parable is about when we're called to account. That the reality is that all of us are what you would call stewards. A steward is somebody who has been entrusted with their master's resources and given authority to handle those in his name. Okay? And that's exactly who we are. Everything that we have, all of the time, money, resources, talents that we have, that is what is entrusted to us as stewards. And we are ultimately called to give an account, because those are not our resources that we're handling. They're ultimately, everything that we have is ultimately God's, and ultimately we're called to give an account of everything that we do. And it's a sobering thought. And we've talked, as we've gone through the Gospels, quite a bit about this concept of rewards, that all of us stand before the judgment seat of Christ, and our works are going to be tried through fire. And what lasts out of that is what is going to turn into our inheritance, ruling and reigning with Christ, our crowns, our gems, okay? That ultimately we just lay at the feet of Jesus. But we either have wood, hay, and stubble, and it's burned up because we've been selfish in our stewardship, or we have gold, silver, and precious stones, and that's because we've been faithful in our stewardship. Okay? But all of us are going to be called to account, just like this steward. Verse 3, then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my Lord has taken away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig. To beg I am ashamed. I'm resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So this guy kind of does a self-inventory, and he's kind of been, wasteful, not thinking about the future, and just kind of haphazardly approaching his job and his role as a steward. Now, in that day, this would have been, fairly decent income and living. Okay, to be over somebody's finances and be a part of their household, a well-respected member of their household, that would have been a good gig, And so now he finds himself like, okay, I'm going, and if you watch Downton Abbey, right, are you going to send me away without a reference? Are you going to write me a reference, right? And in that day, that would have been important, right? I mean, his reputation now would have been tarnished. It's not like he can just go apply for other stewardship or accounting positions. And so he has a professional career, and that's done now. Now he has to find something else to do. And he says, well, I'm not a laborer. Okay, I don't have other marketable skills, and I'm not going to go on the street corner and beg, So he's too proud for that, or you could say he's not humble, or you could say, some people would say he is proud, and he's not going to go that route. Okay, so he's trying to think, what am I going to do? And so he comes up with this plan, and his plan is going to be revealed, but he starts planning ahead now, but it's too late. Okay, and if he had this mindset from the get-go, if he would have taken this kind of approach to his stewardship, to his job, to his life, then he wouldn't be in the mess that he is. But it isn't too late in a sense, okay? It's too late in the sense that it's too late for his job. But it's not too late for him to think forward. And that is kind of the message here, is that whatever mistakes that you come today or to this message or to this passage with in your past, it's not too late. Okay, you could have been a very wasteful, sinful person in your past. You could have been reckless with your life, with money, with relationships, whatever. Okay, but it's not too late. Okay, and the message that Jesus is conveying here through this steward is that he starts planning ahead. He makes a transition here that is going to propel him into a better future. And though he looks back and say, hey, if I would have done this earlier, I'd be in a better off position, it's not too late to make your future better than your present. Okay. So verse 5. So he called every one of his Lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, How much do you owe my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, Take your bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. Then he said to another, How much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, Take your bill, and write 80. So his plan, essentially, is, okay, well, I'm done for in this stewardship position, okay? But I'm kind of done for in general if I don't start doing something now that's going to give me favor on the outside world. And so what he does, he goes through his master's list of clients. And I'm sure he's prioritizing, right? And he's thinking in terms of who does he have a relationship that he can build on, in which if he does something for them, they're likely to help him out when he's very quickly going to be in need. Now, he's not calling them up and saying, hey, my master just fired me, so let's make this deal real quick, right? He's emphasizing the quickness, but he's not saying he's been fired. And so he goes through and he says, okay, Mr. Johnson, he owes, this much. And so I'm going to give him a really good deal, because if I do this for him, he's going to let me stay with him if I need to. Or he might give me a job if I need one. And so he calls him, Mr. Johnson, hey, how much do you owe? $100? Okay, well, let's just say 50. right off the bill. Now, what is this guy doing? Okay, so there's some different views on this. One is that he's just simply exercising his authority as steward, and he's just cutting the cost. And whether or not he should have been doing this, he was doing it. Okay, and it's like an employee at Home Depot. All of a sudden, you get to the counter, and he wants to give you, an inside deal, and so he gives you his employee discount, or he just at the counter he rings up another item than the one you purchased, so you get this discounted price. Right? Not really honest, but does he have the ability to do it? Yeah, he has the ability to do it. Okay, so the second view is that he's removing interest, and there's lots of verses in the Old Testament law that have to do with interest and how much you should charge, or who you should charge interest to and not charge interest to. And so it may be that he was just taking that off and say, hey, let's pretend like this is a fresh debt, and let's go ahead and give you, if you pay right now, I'll give it to you for this price, right? So he's removing interest. Third view is that he's removing his own commission. So what he would have gotten financially, he's just taking that off the bill, so his master gets paid, and he gets a friend on the outside world, somebody he's done a favor for. And so what is he doing? Well, he's fudging the numbers, okay? This is what accountants get in really big trouble for. But at the same time, he is setting himself up for what's going to come next. Okay? He's gotten fired, he's in big trouble, and he's setting himself up good by doing something that is going to put him in good graces with those on the outside. Okay? So, verse 8, and the Lord commended the unjust steward because he had done wisely. This is where people go haywire when it comes to this parable, because you just got through Jesus telling this story of a steward who is really wasteful. He's horrible at his accounting job. He's wasting and losing a bunch of his master's money, and whether he's embezzling it or he's just really horrible at his job, right? Then the master says, hey, give me an account, you're fired. After which he decides he's going to just take it upon himself to call through his client list and give them these really outrageous discounted prices on the debts that they owe the master, so that he can then set himself up for having favor with those very people, right when he turns around and says, hey, guess what? My master fired me. And probably not telling the accurate side of the story. And then Jesus, right after that, and it says, and the Lord commended the unjust steward. Now, the first thing you need to understand is this, that when it says, and the Lord commended the unjust steward, it's not necessarily saying that Jesus commended the unjust steward. He's saying the boss of this guy, the master, when he finds out what this guy did, he commends him because he had done wisely. The second thing, besides knowing that it wasn't Jesus that commended him, but this guy's master, is that he commends him not because he was sneaky and out for self-interest and kind of stealing and embezzling and fudging the numbers or any of that other stuff. He's not commending any of that. He's commending him because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than children of light. So that's Jesus' commentary then, following up, after he says, that his master commended him because he'd done wisely. Now, think about this. So this is what he is commending. He's commending a man who knows how to do well for himself. He's commending a man who knows how to improve a present opportunity. He's commending a man who knows how to provide for future necessity. And he's saying the wisdom that worldly people exercise in the concerns of this world are to be matched by Christians in the concern of what God is concerned about, in godly affairs, in winning people for Christ, advancing the kingdom, and using our resources for that way. So if you think about the intentionality that it takes to save money, which is how worldly people, they plan for the future, right? They plan for retirement. They build a savings. They have, an emergency fund. They see something that they want, and so they save up intentionally for it. They try and get out of debt. Those are the kind of things that worldly concerns. Those are the things that they intentionally do, or even we intentionally do with our finances, in order to obtain a better future, right? And so he's saying that this guy, he was doing what should be done with our finances, okay? And in general, this is what should be done to put the same kind of intentionality and diligence into real, valid, important concerns when it comes to our finances, even. Verse 9, "And I say unto you, make for yourselves friends from unrighteous money, that when you fail, they may receive you in everlasting habitation." So Jesus goes a bit further, and so now it's not just like the master of the servant commending him. Now Jesus is actually using this as, you should be like this guy. And this is where everybody just gets upset. Like, is Jesus commending lying and stealing and cheating and greediness and covetousness and being lazy and not fair and doing illegal things and taking advantage of people and all this kind of stuff? Like, no, he's not doing that at all, okay? What he's saying is that you should provide with earthly things. Use earthly things to set yourself up well for heavenly things. Okay? So this guy, he took his present situation, which was not good, to set himself up for his future situation, which he hoped would be better. Okay? And so that's what Jesus is saying, is that we take our current time, talent, resources, and we use that for setting ourselves up well for eternity. Okay? That is what he's saying. Okay, so set aside that this guy was a shady character. Set that aside. What he did was he took his present situation, made it into a better future. That's what Jesus is commending. And so Jesus, and R.A. Torrey points out that we should make good use of our possessions and enjoyments of this world. And he called it transmutation. And I thought this was brilliant. He's basically saying that you take one substance and you turn it into something else. And money is great for this, right? You can take money and you can turn it into basically whatever you want. Now, you can't take it and turn it into character, or you can't buy eternal life. Okay, you can't do those kind of things. But in terms of worldly, earthly things, you can turn money into basically anything you want to. Which means that the same money can be used for good or evil. Okay? Money is it's a neutral thing. It's a resource that has value, but it's neutral. Okay? You can use it for good or evil. You can use it for foolish purposes or wise. You can use it for wasteful or intentional purposes. Now, think about this. Why was this guy getting fired in the first place?
He was getting fired because he was wasteful with his master's resources. He was a slacker. He didn't take his job seriously. He didn't take life seriously. Okay, and he wasted his master's resources. Now, what did he do? He changed. He changed. And all of a sudden, as soon as he was fired, the light went on. I've got to change. And I've got to do something that's going to set me up for the future. And so he took his present situation, what he had to work with. What did he have to work with? He had a list of clients that he still had access to. He made friends. He made friends with outsiders, okay, so that they would welcome him into their homes. And Jesus says, use money the same way that this guy did. Use your money, your time, your talents, and everything else that God's given you. Use it for eternity. Don't waste it on this life. Don't just blow it on yourself. Use it intentionally to make friends and set yourself up for the future, for eternity. Okay? So I think that is great. Now, another thing that I found is really great. Unrighteous money is not to be trusted for happiness, yet it may and must be made use of in subserviency to our pursuit of that which brings us happiness. You see the difference? And in America, we confuse money with happiness. Okay? Money and fame and power don't bring you happiness. Those things, which may be something that God has entrusted to you. He may have given you great influence. He may have given you a lot of money. He may have given you a great home. He may have given you a lot of stuff. He may have given you brilliance. Okay? Whatever He's given you, use that. It itself is not your happiness. Use that for what will bring you happiness. And ultimately, we learn that happiness, or joy if you prefer, is found in being in the center of God's will. And it's found in loving God, loving others, living a life of sacrifice, of intentionality, that's focused on eternal things, not earthly things. And it doesn't mean you can't have earthly things. It doesn't mean earthly things are bad. It doesn't mean the money's bad. It's about where your heart is and what you do with those things that makes the difference, okay? So, we've waded through the hardest part of this. Now, verse 10, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. If therefore you have not been faithful with your unrighteous money, who will commit to your trust true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? Okay, so this is a principle that Jesus taught kind of repetitively, and it comes up here and there. Okay, if you're faithful with little, you'll be faithful with much. If you're dishonest or unfaithful with little, you won't be faithful with much. And this is something that we get backwards. Okay, we think in terms of, well, the reason I don't give, or the reason why I don't serve now is because I'm really busy. I've got too much on my plate. I really don't have spare money. I can't spare extra Okay, and we think in those terms. We think, well, if I had a little bit more, if I had a little bit more time, if I had a little bit more money, if I had a little bit more this knowledge or whatever it is, okay, then I would do X, fill in the blank. But Jesus says the riches of this world are the less. The grace and glory are the greater. If you're not faithful with the less, then you won't be trusted with the greater, because you won't be faithful with the greater. We think in terms of, if I had more money, then I would give more. Okay? And Jesus says, no, you won't. Yeah, if I had more time, then I would do X, Y. No, you wouldn't. Okay? If I had more energy, then I would do. No, you wouldn't. Okay? Jesus is just calling us on our bluff and saying flat out, no, you wouldn't. If you're not doing it now, you won't do it later. I remember when we were living in California, I had a landscaper come over because our lawn had gotten out of control. Okay, our yard was just a disaster. Okay, and he comes over. He has his crew do it. It looks awesome. Looks better than it ever had been. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try and do a better job of keeping it up. And he says, no, you won't. And he was right. He was right. If something is not a priority to you, then you're not going to just suddenly make it a priority until something changes in you, like this steward, right? Something changed in him, and it was this situation. And all of a sudden he had urgency, right? And so something changed in him. His desires, his priorities, and all of these things changed. And so his situation changed. You can imagine this guy going off and doing something better and more productive with his life. But if nothing changes, if your desires don't change, if your priorities don't change, then nothing else will change. You'll just have more money and you'll waste more money. That's just the honest guy. You'll have more time and you'll waste more time. You'll have more knowledge, you'll waste more knowledge. You just fill in the blank, you'll just have more. And you just think about it. And like, I remember when our kids were little, we started teaching them this. Anytime we gave them money, you give some, you save some, and you spend some. Okay? And at first, a lot of the questions of why. But I can tell you this, that it was much easier for them to give off of the allowance that they had when they were 3 than the allowance that they have now when they're 11, right, or 9, okay? And the truth of the matter is, you think, okay, as a starting college student, or you're in high school or whatever, or just starting out in life, you have young kids, you think, I don't have any money, I don't have anything to spare. But when my situation changes, I'll give more. And Jesus says, no, you won't. Okay, take the 20,000 you have now. If you tithe off of that, okay, if you give off of that, you start giving off of that. When you have 40,000, you'll find it much easier to give that same equivalent amount off of 40,000. If you don't do it with the 20,000, all of a sudden you have 40,000. You think, I have 20,000 more than what I had before. You won't give any of it. I promise you, it just doesn't work that way, and Jesus has it right, okay? So be faithful now with what you have. Luke 16:13. No servant can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So Jesus is basically just saying, watch your wallet. Okay? And it's not because somebody's out to steal it, which, in this world they might be, or it was scary now, is that they don't even have to get to your wallet in order to get to your identity and access your money. And but watch your wallet, because Your wallet will tell you who you're serving. Jesus says, hey, look, you can't serve God and money. Watch your wallet. Where your heart is, there your treasure will be. Okay? Or where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Okay? Watch your wallet. And people have said, I've heard, Dave Ramsey say, all I need to know about you, I can learn by looking at your calendar and your checkbook. And I can tell you what's important to you. And, there's a lot of truth. As much as we might scoff at that, as much as we think that that's not true, the reality is it's true. What you do with your time and with your money tells almost everything about you. And so, watch your wallet. And in verse 14, the Pharisees also, who were covetous, heard all these things, and they derided him, and he said unto them, you are they which justify yourselves before men, but God knows your hearts. For that which is highly esteemed among men is abomination in the sight of God. So, watch your wallet, but watch your heart, okay? Because your wallet's going to lead to your heart, and your heart is what God is going to look at, okay? And so, notice this. Jesus starts talking about money, and the Pharisees, it says they derided him for it. And I find it very telling, not only what your wallet says about your heart, but also when people start talking about money, how you feel about that and your attitude towards that will say a lot about your heart as well. And the Pharisees, Jesus starts talking about money, and their noses go up in disgust, and they, hey, don't stop talking about money, right? What do you hear a lot in churches today? Hey, don't talk about money, okay? It's an ongoing thing because money hits a nerve, okay? When Jesus taught it, it hit a nerve. When I'm saying what Jesus taught you, it hit a nerve. But this is why I love verse by verse teaching through books of the Bible, is because nobody can accuse me of intentionally picking this passage so that I can talk you out of your money. I am simply covering in sequence what Jesus taught and passing it on to you so that we can all be challenged, we can all grow, and we can all do those gut checks, those heart checks. Okay, so on the screen you'll find some questions that you can take this, whether yourself or with a group of people, and go through this. Always a great exercise to do, just to get it into your hearts and apply it into your lives. I just want to encourage you, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others and this channel with others. It helps every time you do that. It actually helps the channel out financially, and it helps us to grow and get in front of others. If you want to connect with us, we invite you to join the conversation. Facebook.com/People of the Free Gift. And until next time, this is Jason from People of the Free Gift, signing off.